Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Well, hello. I feel like it's been forever since I've been in the closet, and I am happy to be back and happy to chat. Thank you. Although following your dad is always like a ridiculous ask, I feel. And then I loved your sister-in-law with the office manager spin. Loved both of those.
We've gotten some good feedback on her episodes.
I hope we get to get her back again.
I know. I already told her she's going to have to join the club again. So,
and hopefully I need to do the same. Like throw some specific questions that she could help answer. For us.
Yes, that'd be awesome. Yes, so listeners, send your questions in for Amanda, the office manager, and we'll get her back on for sure.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant bringing her in. But now you're stuck with me again today, and it's been a while. So I think my favorite question to ask you when we reconvene is, what is going on? Like, what is going on in the world of, practice ownership? Because I know what's going on in my world. Yeah. Actually, no, I don't. My practice, I really don't know. I don't know. One day to the next. Apparently, it's 2023. We're in the middle of January somehow. So just, and for those of y'all not in Texas, like we literally have 2 days that are 80 degrees and then the next 2 days are 40 degrees. So like just from a perspective of trying to figure out what part of the year we're in, I mean, good luck. So all of that to say, I am in my own little bubble world as usual. And so I love our conversations to make me go, okay, what's everybody else dealing with? Like, please tell me I'm not the only one. Mm-hmm. So what is everybody else dealing with? What has come up a lot here lately?
I would say, man, the theme of January so far is, I hate to say it, it's always a negative theme. I need to come up with a positive one. But the struggles of just managing employees.
But see, you don't want positive because then we don't have dental drama. And then we don't need to meet in the closet. So
it's true. Let's keep it negative.
Drama.
But it really is. It's the truth of the matter. I feel like we live in a world of struggles, and the dental field is no different than that. As a matter of fact, it may be amplified. I'm learning after all these years. It might be more difficult in the dental field. And I don't know, January of 2023 has started out with a lot of negative turns for a lot of my clients, really in the way, as I've been thinking about it, knowing that we were going to talk today, really in the way of employees. There's so many different scenarios.
So it's the same old song.
We thought it was going to be different. And here we are.
No. Yeah. Reality Rena knew.
She should have told positive Bethany that it was going to be the same song, 59th verse. So yeah,
2,000 millionth 59th verse. Okay, so what's going on in the world? What do you mean specifically, or maybe not specifically? What examples do you have? Like, because the employee thing could be all over the place. Because I know last year at this time it was employees demanding ridiculous amounts of money and knowing their worth, and us trying to get on board with that. So I think I asked you this about a week or two ago, and that did not seem to be the theme. So what is the theme?
I would say it's just, if I could summarize it, I would say it's more employee, maybe not burnout, but employees fizzling out, or maybe, and maybe it's kind of juxtaposed with the energy that we try to step into January of 2023 with, like, yes, let's do this new year, and that not necessarily being met by the employees. And if anything, it's kind of wah-wah from the employees. And I think it's been presenting itself in a lot of different ways. Turnover, as we've always talked about, that's no different. I'm still having clients experiencing just higher turnover, people leaving for a variety of reasons, and most of those leaving the field, which is this continual trend that is sobering to me, because at some point we have to pull talent back in. So that's been happening. But even just expressed burnout, people talking about what else they want to be doing very openly, things that they're dreaming about that doesn't involve dental, which is always really hard for a practice owner to hear, little fits and meltdowns. And so I feel like there's no one particular thing that's happened. I just feel like it's been a lot of clients mentioning an employee issue. And if I could summarize it, it's more burnout or fizzling out or just not having enthusiasm for their job.
Which is just defeating. Like, it's just defeating. It's scary. I just talked to, literally on my way over here, and I was a little bit late because I was talking to this colleague, I guess. But we're looking for, we're about to lose one of our front desk team members. She's pregnant and does not want to come back to work. And so, we're about 2 months out from there. And so we're starting to go, what are we going to do? I think you and I we were not on the same page as far as who we thought would fill that seat. And so I put a kibosh on your plan and made it harder on us because I'm like, no, I don't want to go that way. I want to do this instead. So, I have nobody to thank but myself for that. Anywho, I, asked my network of colleagues and I just said, hey, do you know anybody? And blah, blah, blah. I heard that there was a lady that I know that has been with this practice, my colleague's practice, for like 14 years, like something ridiculous, and that she's no longer with that practice. And I was like, literal audible gasp. What do you mean? I would have thought she would have retired with that practice. 14 years, 12 years, whatever it was, 10 years. I think it was longer than 10, but apparently she went through a divorce. But to me, I'm like, this colleague, they're always like, they're who I've kind of learned that from, is to go, okay, how can we still retain this employee? What could we, and the fact that they couldn't figure out how to retain her, to me was almost like, was that a red flag to me to go, you're asking for something ridiculous? Or, was the job performance not the same anymore? Right. And so maybe it was for the first 12 years and year 13 has been, so I don't know the answers to all of that, but I was just having a preliminary conversation with her. And it was interesting to me that that's what she said. She's like, I'm out of dental now. And then she said she's working for her kid's school district. And I'm like, well, you can't be making very much. Other than like the hours and the summers off and maybe the benefits. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure at this other office she was getting good benefits.
Yeah.
And she kind of told me what she's making now at the school. And I just was like, something is very wrong here, because I know she was making probably double what she's making at the school. I would be shocked if she wasn't making double. And so, and she said, even, she's like, I love dental. I love all of this. But I'm like, that's such a hard thing to hear from a team perspective. So I just found it was an interesting choice. Yeah. And I'm like, there must be so much drama behind this, because I know they would have probably done everything they could to retain her. So Suddenly now you're not doing that. Is it her? Is it them? What is it?
Right.
All of that to say, like, talk about the fizzling out. And so anyway, that may not have been what you were talking about, but it was just like, really, when you were saying.
That's the story I keep hearing, though. That is the story. Either fizzling out to the point of leaving, fizzling out to the point of poor performance, just kind of being there, but not really there.
Engaging.
Yeah, not engaged in the job. And that, I feel like that leads to a lot of different paths. I think the most common one has been a full-on exit or departure from not only their practice, but the field altogether, which is not what we want. But I feel like that's been happening really in droves since the pandemic. And I think I had this secret hope that maybe that would begin to die down or not happen as much. And I'm just not seeing that trend.
Which is interesting, because I don't feel like I've thought about that in a long time. Mm-hmm. So I guess in my mind, I thought it had kind of gone away, and maybe we've just become desensitized to it.
I think that's part of it. It's just like, oh, well, she's leaving now too. It's just almost become just the norm, the new norm, which is unfortunate. But I think it leads to that oftentimes. So I've got a client that had a couple of his key team members leave, one for due reason. She was, she's having a baby similar to the lady on your team, and she's not planning to come back or resume regular in-office work.
Who can afford this, Bethany?
I don't know.
What are we doing wrong? How do these people do it?
I don't know. It is surprising that we're still having people leave for that reason. Because of inflation, we normally see more people either coming back into the field if they've been off work, or still working. And so it is surprising to still hear that. And we've got, just the client that I mentioned and the lady in your office leaving and staying home. So I don't know. I would say departure of employee, but I think some of that departure has been preempted by, I just don't love this anymore. I'm not as engaged as I once was. So then I think the other thing is, maybe the worst of the two options is they stay on the team and they're just not super effective. And it takes a really long time to spot an ineffective or just kind of deflated team member. Because we just move on status quo thinking they're fine. The whole team's fine. And then something happens where we're hit with the fact that, oh, wow, they're not fine. So to me, it's almost better if a fizzled out employee goes than to have them stay and potentially pull down.
Stink up the office.
The practice.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess that to me, then it's like, okay, so how do we know that we've got a stinky one if they haven't started, they're not at the full-blown stench yet? And then what do we do about it? Because I think when you said that, like, you were starting to tell me about, somebody losing their key. And my question to you is, well, were they not a super competitive office and things they were offering? And you're saying they are. So
right.
I guess that to me brings me back to the point of, what else do I need to do? And I don't know.
Yeah. I would say, to me, one of the big takeaways in dealing with potentially either a fizzled out employee or somebody who's kind of on their way to being fizzled out is we've got to be more aware that that's happening. So, even listeners listening to this podcast, like, to hear this is a current trend. We are seeing employees continue to fizzle out and either underperform or leave the field altogether. This is happening. And so I think we've got to kind of turn our eyes and ears on to look for signs that somebody is fizzling out. One of the things that you do in your practice, which I want you to talk about, is some of the people that are the first to see a fizzling out employee are team members. They know. Right? So an employee can kind of turn it on in front of the practice owner or in front of the doctor, but their true colors really show in front of their teammates. But we never know. Team members don't come to us and say, oh, hey, doc, I just want to let you know that Amy's fizzling out. She really doesn't enjoy it anymore. Just wanted to give you a heads up on that. That does not happen. I can tell you that. Nobody does that. Because there's a little bit of this, there's nothing to report. It's just an observation. So creating space for your team to anonymously be able to report on how other teammates are doing. So talk about the way that you do it in your office with the grading system. I forget what you call it. Where the
engagement scale.
Thank you. How appropriate.
Yes. Okay, so my couple of thoughts there when you're like, tell us what you do. I'm like, I don't know what I do. Like, I don't do anything. What are you talking about? And then as far as the engagement scale, that's not mine. That is Scheduling Institute's.
Yes.
And honestly, we haven't done it in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what that is, it's like, I'm sure people all have their own version of it. And what we were trying to do with it was every week we picked a different employee. And so we had it already mapped out, on our schedule. And it was like, this week is Amy, next week is Bethany, the next week is Susie. And we all do an engagement scale on that person. So everybody anonymously like fills out what they think, on a 0 to 10, I guess, what would you rank this person? And Scheduling Institute had defined what each one was. And so really, like, I think a 5 was not bad enough to fire, but really doing nothing else great. And then it went up from there.
And there's just descriptor words. So for those of you listening, you can put your own employee engagement scale together. It's just, what does a 0 on your team represent? What does a 5 on your team represent? What are the characteristics or qualities? And then what is a 10? If you had a perfect employee, what qualities do they...
Or do it on a scale of 0 to 5.
Yeah.
This one just happens to be 0 to 10. And so what we were doing with those was we would, so at the end of there was a person gathering them. So at the end of the week, you would turn in your slip to that person who had an envelope. The envelope would go on my desk. I would look at it, and then I would hand it over to Bethany, so that when Bethany's in the office next, she would pull that person aside and have a conversation with them. And then the next week, so really Amy's turn wouldn't come again for another 2 months, because Amy could, maybe she got a 6 and we need to talk about her improvements and at a girl, or maybe we're at an 8 and now suddenly we're performing like a 6. So why did we stop doing that? I don't know.
Well, I think it's one of those good habits that we just allowed to kind of, during the chaos of these last few months, we allowed that to kind of go away. But I think it is a really good practice because, number one, it's anonymous. Your team members are rating this person and they don't know where those ratings are coming from. And there is a place for some comments. So a lot of team members would write a comment on there that described why they rated that person a 6 or a 7 or whatever the score was. And I didn't sugarcoat a darn thing. So when I would sit with these employees, I had each of the sheets in front of me, which I knew that some could tell what the writing was, so I always keep it very concealed so that it's truly anonymous. But I would say, okay, this teammate rated you a 6, and they circled these specific words in number 6, and I can't even remember any of them right now to give an example, but they would circle those certain words. And then they also gave you some descriptors. Let me read this. They said, she's engaged, but not near as excited about her position as she used to be. She doesn't really seem to be putting forth her full effort every day. Specifically in morning huddle, she comes in seeming like she doesn't want to be there. If this were improved, blah, blah, blah. And then I would read that. I mean, I'm like, some of them you're like, ugh, I hate to share this with this employee, but it was direct feedback. And so a lot of times the employee in that moment would kind of look at me and go, oh my gosh, I had no clue that I was giving that off. Like I do feel like I've been dragging in the mornings. My kid hasn't been sleeping and I'm just so tired. I didn't realize my team was picking up on that. So sometimes it was just self-awareness. They didn't realize that they weren't giving their full effort. And then sometimes there was more of a reason, like, yeah, I do not feel excited about my job. It feels like it's been really stressful lately. I kind of dread coming to work. Okay, great. Let's talk about that. So it was like a door that led to, first of all, I know what the team thinks about this person very clearly. And we need that feedback because they're the boots on the ground that is watching this person. But second of all, when we had the conversation about those scores, it was often very enlightening. And so I feel like even that practice alone is a way of seeing your employees in a more in-depth way and potentially spotting burnout before we get to I'm done and walking out.
So I just put that on my to-do list that we need to start that back up again. And I think I know why we quit doing it, because the employee that was in charge of it quit.
Yeah.
That's the timing of when we kind of stopped doing this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it was like Christmas and blah, blah, blah. And we were onboarding some new people. So it was like, well, we're in a state of flux right now anyway. But so my one thought on why I didn't want to do something like an engagement scale is because I feel like over time when we've tried doing stuff like that, it's like you get this like useless, people just circling numbers with nothing to add. So yes, if you're expecting, all 6 people on your team to give you 6 great feedback points, no, let's manage our expectations. But you will get 2. Mm-hmm. So in ours, say there's 10 people, we'll get 2 with some useful feedback.
Yeah.
And then the others, if it was just a number circled, then I'm looking for the outliers. Like if everybody else circled 7s and 8s, okay, then we're probably okay. But these 2 people circled 6s on these 2 and everybody else gave them a 9. Mm-hmm. Something's up. And so I can tell handwriting. So it's not, I guess, fully anonymous, but I might just pull in somebody and say, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this?
Mm-hmm. And at least you're aware. Sometimes, you're moving along throughout your days and weeks and you're just getting the job done. And so when you get these forms, 8, 10 forms, and that employee is consistently rated 5 and 6, you're like, holy moly, what have I been missing? Like, how did I not see that this person is not making an impact at all? She's just a neutral addition to the team. And so it is a helpful tool in going, wow, this one wasn't even on my radar, but apparently she needs to be. And I need to figure out what I need to be doing to coach her and make sure she's, performing the way that she needs to be performing. And if nothing else, I feel like it leads to conversations with employees that can be very enlightening as to what's going on with them and why are they a 5 or 6? Why are they underperforming? And that can give you some insight into potentially somebody that's fizzling out. And it may not necessarily be job related. It could be all these external factors that are having an impact and we just didn't know they were going on. But it very well could be job related. And if we can kind of catch that early enough to go, how can we help? What can we do? We might be able to retain that person. We may not, but...
Well, I think that's the other thing. My first thought is, man, why did I put all this effort, and and the person left anyway, and blah, 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 blah. But I think where I need to stop being so defensive about it, or, get my feelings hurt over it. For example, this example I was talking about, this, person who had to leave this office, like, I could talk to you 1,000 times. It's not going to stop your divorce and not going to stop that you need to be there for your kids. But I think the takeaway there's still a takeaway to be had. At least I can see the train wreck coming and I can put some steps in place. Like if it's like, okay, well, we've coached and we've done this and we've done this, and I don't see things changing for this person, then at least what am I doing on my end to go, okay, where are we shifting tasks? And at what point that's probably more of what happened. I mean, I still need to go back and ask my colleagues, like, what happened? How did she leave? And I'm betting you anything, they're probably going to say, we tried to transition her here, we tried to transition her there. And it probably finally hit a point where they had gone, it doesn't make sense for us to retain her anymore.
Yeah.
And, but at least you've had some time. Like I go back to our old office manager, and for years, we saw signs that she was ready to go. I'm going to go back to paralegal school. Okay. And then after that, she was fine for a year or two. And then now I'm going to massage therapy school. And I was like, what are you doing?
Going on?
Yeah. And so even though I couldn't stop it, she left, April of last year. But even though I couldn't stop it, even though it hurt my feelings, even though blah, 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 but at the end of the day, we had seen it coming. And so as far as the impact on the practice, I mean, like everybody else was like, oh my gosh, you probably weren't expecting this. This is awful for you. And I'm like, it's actually not awful at all. Like we already have all the logistics planned out, short of my feelings being hurt. But as far as it impacting the practice, I mean, it was almost nothing. And this is a person that had been with the practice for over 10 years. How could you not? Why would you think you wouldn't feel that? But we didn't. We didn't feel it at all because we saw the smoke signals coming. And so I would say same in this case with these engagement scales. Like if it gives you some idea that there's even a fire starting. Yeah. And I would say what I love about it now that you're saying it again, it's not us. It's not me. It's not the manager. It's not Bethany. And that a lot of times, I've got a couple of my team leads that I feel like I hear their I hear their comments quite a bit. And so sometimes it can skew me to go, oh yeah, what's wrong with this person? Well, then you get the feedback and it's like, these 2 team leads are the only ones who are saying this. All other 8 people, like the 2 team leads gave you a 6 and everybody else gave you a 9. Okay, well, that's really good for me to know. Yeah. Because either everybody else in the office is unaware of where this person should be, or the 2 team leads have unrealistic expectations and we need to go, you know what? The team values these people. So maybe you guys need to see this person from another perspective.
Angle. Yeah. And I would say too, the examples that you just mentioned is another thing. So not only do we have the engagement scale, but listening to commentary. Your office manager that was with you forever, she never once said, I'm leaving, until she did. But it was these little comments that we started to pick up on, to me, that showed both of us there is some type of dissatisfaction that's causing her to look at even other career choices. And we would try, the office manager was more of a closed book. It was very hard to get personal information out of her. And so I think you and I both would kind of try different angles to try to figure out what was the motivation to look at massage therapy school, or what was the motivation to move or to do this or do that. But I think nonetheless, we kept listening to that commentary. And between the 2 of us, we knew there's a good chance. First of all, let's do everything in our power to retain her. And we did. We got super creative with taking things off her plate that was making life miserable, repurposing her job description where she was less involved in management, even to the point of removing her away from the practice and letting her work remotely, which was kind of our last attempt to salvage this relationship with her. I feel like we were incredibly creative trying to retain her. But to your point, sometimes there's just not anything else we can do. But because we listened, like you said, the smoke signals, we saw that brewing and we're like, hey, we're going to try to retain her. So let's do that. But let's also build a really good backup plan for if and when she's gone. And because of that plan, we didn't feel it when she left. And I think for anybody listening to this, if that's the takeaway, where it's like, hey, first of all, watch for the smoke signals, try to figure out where you can hear some of this commentary, pull out the engagement scale so that you can see what your team thinks about this person and pay attention. So pay attention, I guess is the best word. Just pay attention to your employees, because there's a chance, I would say we elongated her career with you by probably a year or two. By making those edits, we were able to retain her for an additional year or two. So there's a chance you could retain, potentially even correct the course completely and retain that employee long term if you're really aware. But then I say the next step is build your backup plans.
So can you talk a little bit more about what does that mean? Because if I hadn't lived through it, and thank goodness you were guiding me through it, but if I hadn't, at this point, I wouldn't know what you mean by have a backup plan.
Yeah.
Like my mindset would be, what do you mean have a backup plan? Have another office manager, but I can't find another office manager. So what do you mean by that?
So the best way to describe it is to disperse the impact away from that person, right? So when we think about anybody on our team, what do they bring to the team that only they bring to the team? If I were to, a better way of asking it is, if I were to lose this person, what would I lose? That helps you get to the impact of this person. And then you go, okay, it's these three things. We would lose this, this, and this from this employee. Now we take A, B, and C, their three most important things that they bring to the team, and we go, how do we disperse that to other people? And this works on a small team. This works on a large team. With your particular situation, we needed a leader on your team, and your former office manager was essentially done with leading. She was burned out. Talk about fizzling out. She was burned out. The fire was dead when it comes to managing. And so we knew that was an area that she brought accountability. She brought auditing and checking people. She brought, some of that HR management, just all the documentation and all of that. Those were things that she brought to the team. Her ideas, we loved hearing her ideas and her feedback on the practice. So she had a really big role in the practice. And so how do we disperse that? We can't really disperse that among your whole team, because then you lose a leader's perspective. You've divided that up so much that now you don't have a resource, somebody to go to, and you really used her as a resource. So it was actually pulling in more people. We actually, at the time, we pulled in 2 additional people into that leadership team. And it's a concept we still use. We have leadership meetings. We've got, I would say, still a primary leader on your team. But I feel like we've got a couple people that have more say-so, we get feedback from them more. They're kind of our point people. And really, it's just because they've been with the team the longest. You've got a lady at the front that we tend to kind of listen to her feedback more. And then your lead assistant in the back, we tend to kind of listen to her. So between that, we dispersed what your office manager brought to the team. And that can happen on any practice. So you just identify, what would I lose if I lost her? And how can I make sure that I've got other people on the team that can take those responsibilities, are trained in those responsibilities? That's what's key. We can have a plan in place, but if we haven't done any kind of training, cross-training to get somebody equipped for that, I'll give you an example of this. One of my clients is losing his office manager as well. She's pregnant, about to have a baby, and she doesn't intend to come back. And so we knew this. She knew early on that she wasn't going to be coming back to work. And so we had several months to get a plan together. And so she had 2 ladies at the front, and we started cross-training her, both ladies, on they had new responsibilities on their plate that they had never had on their plate before, because the office manager always did these. So over the few months, she started teaching them. Then there was a period of time where they did it and they had full access to her to ask questions about this and get clarity. And then we're in this last phase now, actually, where they have the responsibility and they're not allowed to ask her questions. They have to if they can't figure it out, they have to problem solve it on their own. So there's a cutoff point well before her maternity leave. She's due in about a month, where it was like, she's not going to be available. So 1 month before, you be done asking questions. And then we also pulled one of the RDAs from the back to cross-train her for the check-in position, because heaven forbid, now we're down to 2 people at the front. What if one of those is gone? We got to have somebody from the back that has some kind of crossover. So we've been planning this for months, and that takes months to get a plan like that together. If we wouldn't have thought about that, or heaven forbid, this lady would have decided 2 weeks before she delivered that she wasn't coming back, which does happen, by the way, I would say with any pregnant person, just plan that they're not going to come back, so you can be months in advance.
You can be pleasantly surprised if they do come back.
Yeah. Yes. So that's what I would say. Just disperse those responsibilities and those things that person brings to the table among other people.
And that's where the challenge comes in. That's where we found ourselves at this point last year, where we had a hygienist, same thing, that, kept telling us she was going to come back. And I was like, she's not coming back. Like, I could read the signals, but she kept saying it. And sure enough, it was 1 week. She gives 1 week and I'm not coming back. I was like, yeah, we knew that. But we'd already adjusted the schedule, because I was like, well, if she does come back, it would be much easier to add on than take off. And then now with the one that's about to head out at the end of March, we've already gone, okay, what does she do primarily? And what can we get everybody else to look at that? And now the part we're left with is, now who's taking over this? And so we stopped 2 months, and I still don't have an answer to that, but I'm looking at everybody else on the team to go, who else can absorb a task? Or if you were doing this task, could we hand it off to that person and then you pick up this? So it's just this game of shuffling around, which is exhausting, and the training is exhausting, but it's the
only way to do it now. Unfortunately, that is a trend that hasn't stabilized. Turnover is still just so high that it's like, we've got to prepare for that. I think we have to watch for turnover, like we're talking about, watch for those burnout signals, or even like pregnancy, being one of the things. Like, just assume that they're not coming back. And you said 1 week. This was 1 week before she was supposed to return from her maternity leave.
Yeah.
Like, we had been opening up the schedule because she's persistent throughout the whole maternity leave. I'm coming back. And then 1 week before her first work day, she bailed.
Which, although we hadn't built the schedule up much, because even then we were watching the signals.
Yeah.
Because before she left on maternity leave, she said, no, I am coming back. Mm-hmm. And then early on, we were like, are you coming back full-time, part-time, whatever? So she wiffle-waffled on that. Mm-hmm. And I think she took, 3 months off? And so, the first month was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna... And then, the last half of her maternity leave was like crickets. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't respond to emails. She wouldn't respond to messages. And I was like, well, there's the writing on the wall right there. So I guess that would be the point is, and I know we could keep talking and talking, but I think, in the interest of us burning out on this, burning out our audience, to wrap up here, I think I think the point is pay attention.
Yes, pay attention. I love that. That's a good note to end on.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.